The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. We all like a great ghost story, and we all like funny stories. Today's Gospel reading is a funny ghost story. Literally is. But you've heard it so often, you're probably just going to go right over your heads. So for a few minutes, imagine you're hearing this for the first time, and it's a funny ghost story. Here's how it goes. Now, that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened in Jerusalem. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, a man called Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who doesn't know the things that have happened there the last 3 days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. And we had hoped that he was going to be the one to redeem Israel. And what's more, this is the 3rd day since all this took place, and in addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find the body. They came back and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said to them that he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women said, but they didn't see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets had spoken. Didn't the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all of the prophets, he explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning the Messiah. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued as if he were going further, but they urged him strongly, "No, stay with us. It's almost evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took some bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" So they got up immediately and rushed back to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those who were with them assembled together. And these people were saying, "It's true, the Lord has risen. He appeared to Simon Peter." Then the two from Emmaus told what had happened to them on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. A gospel inspired by God. When you're Irish, it's very difficult to take even serious things seriously. So we like to make fun of everything, even really serious stuff. So I remember when I was still living in Kenya, I did a lot of retreat work. I preached a lot of retreats to nuns and priests and community groups. So I remember around one Easter period, I'm doing a week-long retreat with a group of African sisters called the Asumbi Sisters. And it was a long, tiring week because I would give 3 lectures every day, and then there'd be question and answers. I'd celebrate Eucharist for them, and then do individual spiritual direction with them. So at the end of the week, I'm jaded, wiped out totally. And it's the last lecture, the last session, and the last question and answer. And one of the sisters says to me, "Padri, mbona wafuasi wake Yesu hawakumtambua baada ya kufufuka kwake?" Why was it that the disciples of Jesus failed to recognize him after his resurrection? And at this stage, I'm just wiped out, so I make a quick joke. I say, "Sababu wakati alikuwa kaburini alikuwa mangoa ndoto yake." Because while he was in the tomb, he shaved off his beard. And I'm expecting this reaction from the sisters. And the sister says, "Kumbe, wow." And I have this vision, I'll go back to Kenya, and there'll be some new religion started called the Church of the Clean-Shaven Jesus. Now, I think there must be a bit of Irish in him as well, because he made fun of really, really serious stuff. I mean, what's more serious than the cross? But he made fun of it. So if you're really listening to today's story, Jesus had an extraordinary sense of humor. Here's these two guys walking on the road to Emmaus. It's the Sunday, 3 days before Jesus himself had been crucified, and he disguises his appearance. He's going to play a joke on them. And so he's walking along beside them. These two guys are talking really animatedly, and he observes them, and he walks up, and instead of saying, "Hi, guys," and just keep going, he's obviously a very fast walker, because he's catching up with these guys. So he didn't just say, "Hi, guys, nice day," and keep going. You know, he was inquisitive, and he says, "What are you talking about? You're really, really intense. You know, what's the deal?" And they say, "Dude, are you the only person in Jerusalem who don't know what's happened there the last few days?" He says, "No. What happened?" "Oh, you Vesmir. You didn't hear about Jesus of Nazareth?" "Jesus who?" "Jesus of Nazareth." Never heard of the guy. He was a great prophet. Everybody knew about Jesus of Nazareth. You know, we thought he was going to be the Messiah. And then on Friday, he got crucified. We thought he was like going to be the king of Israel. And then to make matters worse, this morning, a few women who went to the tomb to anoint the body, they came back and they told us that they had a vision of angels who said that he was risen. And a few of our friends ran to see it, and the tomb was empty. And Jesus says, "Wow, interesting story." And he says, "That reminds me. Isn't there some story in the scriptures that when the Messiah comes, he's going to be killed and rise from the third day?" And then he starts opening up the scriptures, beginning with Moses, and he goes through all the books of Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, and then on to the prophets, major prophets, minor prophets. And he's explaining to them what the Old Testament had said about the Messiah when he comes. And they're saying, "Holy God, we never figured that out. Wow, maybe it's true, maybe he is risen." So at this stage, they've reached Emmaus. And he does the second joke. He says, "Well, it was lovely chatting with you guys. You know, catch you later." And they say, No. It's nearly night time. Come stay with us." He says, "Okay." And so they find a little hotel and they go in and they order some bread and some wine. And the bread arrives and they're sitting around the table and they said to him, "Can you say the motzi for us? You know, the blessing over the bread. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz." Amen. That's what they're expecting. But instead of that, he starts celebrating a Eucharist. And there's a code for Eucharist always, I tell you. There's a code. Whenever you see these four phrases, you know there's a Eucharist happening. When you hear that, he took, he blessed, he broke, and he distributed. You know you're in the presence of Eucharist. And that's exactly what he did. He took it, he blessed it, he broke it, and he started giving. All of a sudden, their eyes are opened. They finally realize it's Jesus. And what does he do? Vanishes. He's gone again. And so he had an extraordinary sense of humor. He could make fun even about the death and the resurrection, you know, and the ascension itself. And that's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to just make 3 main points this morning. I'm going to talk about Friday's cross, and then I'm going to talk about Sunday's cross, and then I'm going to talk about Thursday's cross. So Friday's cross is the cross of crucifixion. It's the cross of the passion. Now, the interesting thing is, the given wisdom is that the Romans invented crucifixion. They didn't. It was the Persians who invented crucifixion. The Persians were using crucifixion as a way of torturing and killing people long before the Roman Empire came into being. The Romans borrowed it from them, but it was practiced by a lot of other people as well, including the Hebrews themselves. So there was, for instance, a very vicious civil war in the land of Israel about the year 100 BC between two brothers, descendants of the Maccabees, both of whom wanted to be the king and the high priest at the same time. And one of them, a guy called John Alexander, captured 700 rebels and crucified them. And to make matters worse, as the men are dying on the crosses, he paraded their wives and children in front of them, and he slit the throats of the women and children as the men are dying on the cross. And so crucifixion was being practiced before the Romans, brought it into the land of Israel. The Romans, of course, were really, really good at this thing. And so we think that, it's probably one of the most vicious systems ever devised to kill another human being. But it's not, when you think about Christ, for me it is not basically about an instrument of torture. It's a symbol of transformation and a symbol of connection. And so when I look at the crucified Christ, a spread eagle on the cross, what I see is the following. I see that the horizontal dimension of the cross represents the connection between all living things. It is the realization that all sentient beings are brothers and sisters to us. And when I see the vertical dimension of the cross, it tells me that the earth is connected to the heavens, that there's a meeting between the immanence of God and the transcendence of God. And the intersection point is the self. You are the intersection point between all of your relationships with all your, earthly brothers and sisters of all species and your connection to the divine. That's who you really, really are. And if you're not properly connected to all life and you're not properly connected to God, you have no idea who you are. You are the intersection point between your relationships and your connection to Source. And so I had this really interesting vision just last year, on Good Friday last year, watching Christ on the cross. And it's like one by one, he's extending his kind of spectrum of relationships as he's dying on the cross. And he starts with himself, firstly. He's obviously in tremendous pain and agony, both psychologically, spiritually, and physiologically. And so his first concern, of course, like any organism, is for himself. And so he's convinced at some stage that he's been abandoned by the Father. And so he says, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? So the extraordinary psychological and spiritual vacuum into which he's temporarily sucked, that really difficult. And he speaks from that place. And then physiologically, the torture of this is really extreme. And at one stage he cries out, I'm really thirsty. And so his first concern, obviously, like any organism, is for his own experience. But he transcends that really quickly. And now, as he's hanging there, he notices a little bit of distance his mother and Mary of Magdala and John, the beloved disciple. And now his self-concern broadens out to concern for his family. He's now wondering, what's going to happen to my mother? And so, nodding towards him, he says to John, John, look after my mother. And then to the mother, look after John. So he's now concerned for those who's left behind, the friends he's left behind. So now the extent of his compassion is broadening out beyond his own self-concern into those whom he loves. And then the third level of it is there are two people crucified with him. And one of them is berating him in his own agony and pain. He's screaming out, you're supposed to be the Messiah. Get down off the bloody cross and save the whole bunch of us. And the other guy says to him, stop screaming at him. We're dying because we deserved it for our crimes. This man is innocent. And he says to Christ, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Christ's response is, today, not in the future time, today, you will be with me in paradise. So now he's extended from his self-concern to the concern for his family to concern for fellow sufferers. The next stage, he's now looking down at the Roman soldiers who were just bored to death. They've done this thing 10,000 times. They're not even taking pleasure in it. It's just a day's work. They're going to get wages for it, maybe even a bonus because they're working a Friday evening. I don't know. But they're just bored out of their skulls. And they're going to just take his clothes and divide them between them. That's the bonus for them. And then there's the priest standing afar, mocking and trying to justify their own inhumanity to a fellow Jew. And there's the crowd that saw him, week after week after week, heal the sick and feed the hungry, and they're just there watching. It's like just a spectacle, like, reality TV or something, just watching to see what's going to happen. And Christ cries out again. He's now going the next stage. He says, Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing. So he's extending slowly by slowly the level of his concern for all creatures. So that's the horizontal dimension of the cross for me. And then the last two utterances where he's accomplished his mission. He's done precisely what he signed up to do, which was to live with love for all beings in every moment, in every circumstance, in whatever form love demanded of the situation. And he's finished it. And he's able to say, it's finished, mission accomplished. And then finally he makes the connection to the Father. Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. So there's now the vertical dimension of it. So the cross isn't just an instrument of torture, it's the connection between all living beings and the connection to Source. So that's the Friday cross. The Sunday cross is a little bit different. So I've said to you many times that my definition of truth is that Truth is not the same thing as fact. Something can be factual but not true, and something can be true but not factual. Facts are just how the physical world operates, the laws of the physical world, data points from physicality. They may be factually accurate, but they're not necessarily true. Something is true only when it transforms you and aligns you with God. And something is ultimate truth when it transforms you radically and aligns you permanently with God. And so for the apostles after the resurrection of Jesus, it was the encounters they had with him, particularly in their Eucharist, were easily the most transformative experiences of their lives. It turned these cowardly narcissists into these courageous people, all of whom were prepared to die for the message. And so what gave? There was something about the post-resurrection appearances of Jesus that were radically transformative. And therefore, in that sense, they're totally true. Whether they were, however you describe them, whether it was his physical body, an etheric body, an astral body, a soul body, whatever it was, their encounters with the risen Christ were so powerful that it was radically transformative. And therefore, by my definition, they're totally true experiences. But how do you press upon this upon people who haven't had an experience of the risen Lord? How do you tell people, it really was he? So they got a problem. They have to impress upon the audience that it really was the same Jesus they encountered after his resurrection as they had known before his death. But there's something very different at the same time. And so they employ two different kinds of images, what biblical theologians call the before-after images and the below-above images. So the before-after images are to impress upon the audience that it really was the same Jesus they met after the resurrection as they had known before the crucifixion. And so they said, well, he was real. We met him at one stage on the beach. We'd been fishing all night, caught nothing. And in the morning when the fog lifted, there he was standing on the beach and he was cooking food for us. And he invited us ashore, and we ate with him. He ate fish and he ate bread with us. Thomas, who wasn't there for one of the encounters and didn't believe he really had risen, when he came again, he said to Thomas, take your finger and put it into the nail marks, and take your fist and put it into my side. So they're saying, it's not a ghost, we weren't seeing a ghost. This was a real flesh and blood person. So they're the before-after images. But there's a problem, because there's something radically different about Jesus after the resurrection. And so today's story is an illustration. So many people who'd known him for many years didn't recognize him. There's a great story in John's Gospel where on the morning of the resurrection, Mary of Magdala, his closest companion, didn't recognize him. And again, he's using a sense of humor. She's kneeling beside the empty tomb and she's crying her eyes out. And you'd imagine that Christ would come up and say, Mary, I'm back, it's okay, it's all going to be fine, here I am. He didn't. He said, woman, why are you crying? He's making a joke of it at this stage. There she is crying her eyes out. He's just gone through this awful experience. Why didn't he just come and say, it's me, I'm back, it's okay, everything is fine. He made a joke of it again. Woman, why are you crying? He knew bloody well why she was crying. Of course she was crying. She just lost the love of her life. But somehow the Irish in him had to make a kind of a joke about it. Yeah. So he was different in some ways. He was able to appear in rooms, disappear in rooms, manifest, demanifest at will. So literally reconstruct his molecular body and dissolve it instantaneously when he chose. So there's something very different. So these are called the below-above images. So now when you look at it, you've got a second cross. The before-after is the horizontal arm of a new cross, and the below-above is the vertical arm of the cross. And there's Jesus again at the intersection point. Now, when you think about it, before-after represents time, and below-above represents space. And if Einstein is true, that we live in a universe which is basically the fabric of our universe is space-time, then Jesus is master of time, and he's the master of space. So he's the master of space-time, which means he's the master of the universe. That's what's represented. So the cross of resurrection is a cross of mastery. It's a cross that, is much more powerful than time and much more powerful than even space. So there's the Sunday cross. The third cross then is the cross of the Thursday cross. And it's the cross of Ascension Thursday. At some stage, he departs finally in his physical form from the planet, and we'll have a different kind of interaction with it. And so one of them happens on the Friday It's a passion cross. The next one happens on a Sunday. It's a transformational cross. And this one is an ascension cross on Thursday. So what does it mean? What does the ascension cross, what might it mean? I'm going to make just 5 main sub-points here. There's the ascension of Jesus. There's your ascension. There's the ascension of your culture. There's the ascension of your planet. And there's the ascension of your cosmos. So what did the ascension of Jesus mean? It means that after 33 years in a physical spacesuit, that he's no longer inhabiting a physical spacesuit. He's now operating in a different dimension because he's a multi-dimensional being. And his influence on the planet is not in a physical form. It is now in some kind of etheric form. So the ascension means that he's shifted into a different dimension, or he's no longer appearing, in a physical form in this dimension. Now, so that's what represents his ascension. But you yourself are called to the very same kind of ascension. Every single one of you is a multi-dimensional being. Unfortunately, we live in a culture which impresses upon us that we're single-dimensional beings, that we literally are just our physical selves. We live in a WYSIWYG world, to use a computer term. WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. So we live in a materialistic, reductionistic, scientific model that tells us the only reality is that which can be apprehended by our sensorium or through extension by our instrumentation. And so we're confined to this little physical thing. And if you believe that, you're stuck. And the truth is, you're as much of a multidimensional being as is Jesus. You exist at all of these other levels. And so while you have to honor incarnation, and celebrate incarnation, the resources of having a body, having emotions, having an intellect, having personality, you can't identify with them. They do not represent your core self. Your core self is an eternal essence that was never born and can never die. And therefore, you are being called into ascension yourself on a regular basis. But part of your ascension is the realization that you volunteered for incarnation on planet Earth again and again and again. And in the process, you made what I've called preconception contracts with a group of souls to keep appearing lifetime after lifetime and creating a drama which affords every single one of you the opportunity of learning a particular lesson. It may be courage in one lifetime, or compassion in a lifetime, or a sense of humor in a lifetime, or patience in a lifetime, or integrity in a lifetime. And so we come back as a troupe, we change roles, we change relationships, even genders, but the same group of souls keep appearing in order to afford each person the opportunity of growing. But we can't identify with the spacesuit. We can identify temporarily with the mission for which the spacesuit gives us the resources, but we need to ascend constantly. And part of that is the realization that we need the patience of realizing, as St. Paul put it, using an agricultural metaphor, he said, one man sows and another man harvests. I would say there's actually 3 phases. One man sows, another man weeds, and another man harvests. So in actual fact, lifetime after lifetime, it's not like that where one lifetime is about sowing, another lifetime is about weeding, and another lifetime is about harvesting. We're doing all 3 at the same time. In every incarnation, there are fields in which you are sowing seeds for the future. There are fields in which you're weeding the results of the past. And there are fields in which you're reaping the rewards of other incarnations that you've lived already. So you're working in 3 different fields all the time. A sowing field, a weeding field, and a harvesting field. Or to use a kind of more a domestic model or metaphor, for an urban community, it's like you're doing the laundry. But there's 3 piles of laundry. There's a pile in the washing machine, there's a pile in the dryer, and there's a pile on the ironing board, and you're ironing it. And at any one stage, if you're a mother, you're probably doing all 3 at the same time. There's stuff you're washing right now, there's stuff in the dryer right now, and there's stuff that you're ironing right now. And so simultaneously, the ability, to do all 3. But we've been raised in a culture in which we expect that we only have to harvest and eat. We're not expected to sow, we're not expected to weed, it's just about eating and enjoying. And we live in a world in which we're not expected to do any laundry, but always to appear in nice, clean clothes. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Laundry involves washing, drying, and ironing. Farming involves planting, weeding, and harvesting. And so each incarnation we find ourselves in, our job, our ascension process is accepting all 3 and saying, yeah, there's stuff I need to sow for future incarnations. Good deeds I need to sow. There's weeding I need to do for mistakes I've made in the past. On the basis of feedback, this didn't work, so I'm going to weed that out of my repertoire of responses to life. And then there's a harvest where I'm, eating the goodies of the good stuff I've done, reaping the benefits of what I've done. So that's what a personal ascension would look like. There's a cultural ascension. The entire culture itself needs to grow. And it's an artifact of evolution that when you look at evolutionary biological history, any species that refuses to continue to complexify, or that refuses to continue to adapt to its environment, it becomes extinct. It walks itself into an evolutionary cul-de-sac. And the biological data of the planet is filled with such species. Either they've destroyed their environment, or they've been unable to adapt to new circumstances, and they're rendered extinct. That's how evolution proceeds. Only those systems that can continue to complexify and adapt and accommodate to new circumstances, they're the ones that survive. We live in a culture, and I'm talking not just about the United States, I'm talking about the Western world in general, in which there are so many dysfunctional systems. We have an agricultural system which is dysfunctional. We're poisoning each other with GMOs and stuff. We've reduced agriculture to agribusiness. We're destroying the healing process is in the hands of pharmaceutical industries who are poisoning us. We live in a world in which the financiers are destroying our world and crashing our economic models. We live in a world in which the military-industrial complex is eating up resources while 6,000 children die of starvation every single day. We live in a world even where a lot of the mainstream religions are preaching prejudice, hatred of each other. We live in a world in which the media are just spoon-feeding us the agenda of those who want to be in control. All these systems are going to crash. It's evolutionary. It is unavoidable. That is how evolution proceeds. Dysfunctional systems run themselves into evolutionary cul-de-sacs. The question is, when will it happen? We have no idea when it will happen. Is it going to take 10 more years, 100 more years, 2 more generations? I can't say. But I can guarantee you they'll all crash. Dysfunctional systems always crash. And cultures that can't continue to complexify, complexification of culture at this stage demands more and more adherence to love. The societies that will survive are societies that opt for love, which let go of prejudice and greed and violence. They're the only ones that will survive into the future. I have no idea when it's going to happen, but I guarantee you it will happen. And the question then becomes for us, have we the patience to realize that, we may not harvest right now the seeds of what we're planting right now. We may have to come back in another generation or 2 generations in order to reap the benefits, but it is going to happen. Cultures, which are dysfunctional, become extinct. So that's what a cultural ascension looks like. A planetary ascension looks like this, it seems to me. When you look at our little planet, 4.6 billion years of age, life is 3.7 billion years of age. But life began to evolve really, 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 really slowly. For over a billion and a half years, there were only single-celled creatures on the planet, little simple bacteria and protozoa. When you go back even 700 million years ago, the only complex life forms lived in the oceans. There were no complex life forms on land. All of the multicellular creatures lived in the oceans. At some stage, you got amphibians that came onto the land. If you go back 300 million years, there were no mammals on the planet yet. So there were no emotions on the planet. The mammals were the ones who created emotions and dreaming and care of their young. So all life forms before that, you got born, you were on your own. If you're born to a turtle, she lays an egg, she's gone, you're on your own. Figure it out for yourself. You're a crocodile lays eggs, she's gone. The mammals introduced, child-raising practices, emotions, and dreaming. But 300 million years ago, they didn't exist on planet Earth. 1 million years ago, Homo sapiens didn't exist on planet Earth. So it means there were no rational animals on our planet 1 million years ago. Homo sapiens arrived in the scene maybe 250,000 years ago. And that's the first breakthrough into rational animals. 100,000 years ago, self-reflective creatures did not exist on our planet. Homo sapiens sapiens hadn't arrived. Homo sapiens sapiens arrived about 50,000 years ago. Before that, there were no self-reflective creatures on our planet. Why do we think that evolution has stopped? Why do we think that after 4.6 billion years of that process on planet Earth, that evolution is okay, mission accomplished, that's it, I'm finished? It will continue to proceed. There are species that are coming down the pike which are going to be much more evolved than us. And like many other species, most species reach a bifurcation point, a choice between how they're going to decide to respond to new environmental circumstance. And some of them then become extinct. They make the wrong choices. And so I've told you many times that I see Homo sapiens sapiens bifurcating into two groups. One group I call Homo spiritualis. They're the people who will opt for a Christ consciousness, who will make decisions predicated on compassion and regard for all life forms. And there'll be another group called Homo sociopathicus, and they'll wipe themselves out. They'll probably wipe out a lot of the others in the process, but they'll certainly wipe themselves out. They'll be extinct in 3-4 generations, I don't know. And then, the Homo spiritualis will inhabit the earth. So that's what planetary ascension looks like to me. And then finally, there's cosmic ascension. That the entire cosmos itself, I believe, it's a single journey from God's womb to God's heart. And no matter how many kind of diversions or detours or deviations happen in the interim, the destination will be God's heart. So it started in love, it's built for love, and it arrives finally at love, no matter how many detours we make in the process. So we can save ourselves a lot of problems, a lot of heartaches by opting for love immediately. Now, there's the old statement that says, think globally, act locally. I'm going to change that a little bit this morning and say, dream cosmically, think globally, and act locally. So we end with one little illustration. There's a great story I came across a few days ago of two women walking on a beach. And the beach is littered with the stranded starfish. And they're trying to wiggle on the beach, and they're going to die, obviously. And every so often, one of the women goes down and picks up a starfish and throws it into the waves. And then 3 or 4 paces, she picks up another and throws it into the waves. And her companion is watching her. And after about 10 attempts, she says, why are you doing that? You're not going to make any difference. There's thousands of them here. And the woman bends down again, and she picks up one and throws it into the waves, and she says, well, I made a difference in that one's life.